From my last review of early settler America in 1695, we jump forward 150 years and halfway around the world for this month to Edo, Japan in the 1850s. I am of course talking about Team Ninja's Rise of the Ronin, a brand new PlayStation exclusive from the studio who brought you Neo and the Dead or Alive franchises. This was my first time playing a game from this studio, and I was excited to see how they handled a complex gameplay alongside a historical setting. The game opens on a key moment in both Japanese and world history as Western pressure on the country reached a boiling point. The shogunate, the ruling power, is under pressure as American forces sail into Edo Bay and Western influence fractures public opinion. Sides are being chosen, riots are raging, and assassinations of potential threats to the status quo are a regular occurrence. Enter the Blade Twins, two orphans raised for the sole purpose of overthrowing the shogunate by a skilled warrior. When things go sideways on a mission to assassinate the commodore of the American ships, Matthew Perry, the Blade Twins are plunged into danger and political intrigue as they must navigate a strange new world and continue their life's mission. The game spans several years leading up to and including the Boshin War, which was a real historical event that changed Japan and the lives of its people forever. For me, this was a really interesting choice for a backdrop to a game. It's a period I already knew a little about, and it's encouraged me to go off and do further research. To give you a quick history lesson, Japan had a policy of foreign isolation for more than 2.5 centuries that significantly prevented them from trading or interacting with outside countries. The ruling military faction of the Tokugawa shogunate banned pretty much anyone from entering the country and its own people from leaving. The main reason historians will argue that they did this was due to the perceived negative impact that open foreign trade and movement had had on peace and shogunate control before 1603. Many attempts were made by Western countries to change this, including France, Russia and America. It was the latter of these that would have the most impact and eventually have a significant hand in the end of the seclusion policy. Matthew Perry was a real man who basically forced the shogunate into diplomatic relations, which opened Japan up to Western influence afterwards. This is a very simplistic rundown of a very complex part of history, so please don't come at me for not going into much more detail. This is a game review, not a history lesson after all, and I'm already way off topic. This is all to say that I'm impressed with the choice by Team Ninja in Rise of the Ronin. This game actively invests in the time period, and you can see how Western influence is slowly seeping into the society as you explore and move through the years. That said, if the game had been more streamlined in other areas, something that I will discuss later, then I believe they could have really homed in on the plot and made a much more memorable and thought-provoking experience. I was also impressed by a couple of things right at the beginning of my playthrough of this game. First off is the user accessibility options, which you are presented with as soon as you open the game for the first time. It's a nice touch just to make this kind of element more normalised, although please ignore how I just inverted the wrong axis. It had been a long day. Second is the character creation menu. I love customising characters, and it felt like Team Ninja had gone through a checklist of all the things that annoy me on other games' customisation and changed them. For example, you can compare with a previous appearance to see exactly what the change you've made is immediately. You can also change elements of a hairstyle such as length, bangs and hairpiece within the style you've chosen. The possibilities are genuinely endless, and I spent far longer on customization than I ever have. In fact, I ended up customizing my characters twice for reasons I will now get onto. A major issue I think that Rise of the Ronin faces is that it is just too vast and tries to incorporate too many things too quickly. As mentioned, I'd already had a long day when I sat down to first play this game, and within 20 minutes of post-customization gameplay, I had to stop because I was not retaining any of the information provided. So many instructions were popping up with lengthy descriptions, and I barely even mastered that the buttons were the opposite way round to the last game I'd played. I returned to the game the next morning though with a large pot of coffee, and I was determined to get my £70 worth. This time I did get into the swing of things, and I would advise any potential player to stick with it, as there will be plenty of time to practice and actually work out what the fuck you're doing later. The main thing I found was that this game will not reward button mashing. Instead, the main focus is to get in some perfectly timed counter sparks as an enemy goes to attack, which will then leave them open to taking damage. Whilst on low level enemies, you could probably just hack away until their HP runs down. Stronger enemies and bosses will have decimated you well before that happens. This is an element that I actually learned to really enjoy, and combat can flow nicely as a result. Critical hits lead to some brilliant and bloody kill shots, and you can customise your playthrough with different stances, weapon types and upgrades. Personally, I found a lot of the game a bit stagnant. Team Ninja had clearly taken a leaf out of Ubisoft's playbook and overpopulated the world with side quests, things to do, and additional loot coin increase missions. Seriously, the amount of stuff going on is ridiculous. You've got co-op missions, you've got choices, you've got customizable bases and optional redesigns, you've got bonds and factions to maintain, you even have a cat concierge to organise. The list just goes on and on and on. It all feels very loud, and I don't think it would be possible to actually keep all elements perfectly in mind as you play this game, meaning there's going to be things you miss out on as a result. One way you can see this is through the combat options menu. For a game that is solely for PlayStation, it feels like it's been ported in a similar way to my experience playing Baldur's Gate 3 on PS5, for example. There are too many buttons in awkward positions that have to be pressed to do certain things that can be significant to combat. Stances are another issue, as I found it virtually impossible in the middle of a fight to work out which stance I would be in or which loadout I should select for each weapon, because it had never really been explained, save for a quick tick box right at the beginning. I didn't want to compare this game to Ghost of Tsushima, but this is one area where they overlap, and Rise of the Ronin is definitely left wanting. In Ghost of Tsushima, it was clear and simple which stance would be best against which enemies. In Rise of the Ronin, it's very hard sometimes to work out exactly what the game wants from you. Next up, this is also a bugbear of mine, but there is just too much stuff. Every person I killed, every chest I opened, every mini side mission I completed gave me multiple pieces of armour or weaponry, which meant I spent a significant amount of time having to check my inventory when all I wanted to be doing was hacking a guy's head off with a massive adachi. I know there's a subsect of Baldur's Gate 3 players who love organising their inventory, but I think even they would struggle to find joy in this junk loot nightmare. Also, there was the often classic scenario of buying an expensive piece of equipment from a store only to immediately find something better on a corpse. I actually found I ended up being not interested in exploring the different shops options because there just didn't seem to be much point. It kind of felt like the devs weren't sure what kind of game they wanted to make, and so they threw absolutely everything in to be on the safe side. That said, there are some genuine moments of wonder and joy in this game as you manage to fell a boss, glide across gorgeous landscapes, or just hug a cat. I'm nowhere near done uncovering all the secrets of Rise of the Ronin, and the issues I've mentioned will not stop me from doing so. I just may need a spot of meditation before I look at my inventory again.